Let's move on to RB2 in the consensus rankings. It's Jonathon Brooks. And I've made the argument that if he had not torn his ACL last year, the conversation about this running back class would be much different. Because I do think he's the one guy in the class that if he just is perfectly fine and regains all of his athleticism, could take the league by storm the second half of his rookie year and jump into the top 12 of the dynasty running back rankings and really be a complete RB1. Am I too high on Jonathon Brooks?
No, I think that that's probably right. If you look at the stuff that my model's looking at, obviously it's production-based and age-adjusted production-based. And, there are some players, so teammate score is going to help a guy like Jonathon Brooks, right?
Yes.
You had Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson coming out last year who played ahead of him. You can't really hurt or ding Brooks for not producing in a backfield with those two guys. And then what we saw this past year is he had a really good total yard per team play rate of 1.99. That's prorated before the ACL injury. That would have been that's one of the better numbers in the class. He's just one of 6 backs in the class to have a best season 10% reception share and a 1.9 total yards per team play rate. He's good in pass protection. He was a 4-star recruit. He really has sort of the total package, if you will. I think he would be the consensus RB1. And the other thing too is he weighed in at the combine heavier than I thought he was going to be. But, this is one of those things where, the model might have, because I have to use combine measurables to get everything standardized for weight. And, a guy who isn't necessarily doing a bunch of cardio right now because of this ACL injury, maybe he's, 5 or 6 pounds heavier than what he probably plays at. Right. So you have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because you watch him, he's a little bit slimmer, of a back as opposed to like a more compact, like Blake Corum or something like that. But look, I think that Brooks probably would be the easy consensus RB1. I do think though, Heath, that, from a game theory perspective and from like a dynasty perspective, I understand if people, even if they, because my model is probably going to look at Jonathon Brooks and have him as the RB1, depending on draft capital and stuff. Right. Like I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. I might not necessarily draft him as in his own tier or even maybe as the RB1, only because there's a real chance we don't see 100% Jonathon Brooks in year 1 in his rookie season. And if that happens, you're going to have some doubt entering year 2 where, is he just not that great? Or is he like, you're just going to ask a bunch of questions, and you also might see his value drop a little bit just in the dynasty market. So I do think that you still have to take the ACL injury into consideration because of that game theory component. You want your guys to appreciate and value, and there's at least that chance that Jonathon Brooks doesn't.
Yeah, and I think like we had 2 examples last year of the young guys coming off the ACL, and Breece Hall and Javonte Williams. I was kind of out on both. It turned out that the market was mostly right. Breece Hall needed about 6 weeks and then became the second best running back in fantasy football. And Javonte Williams just kind of struggled along and plodded all season long. And I don't think we have any good reason to have a lean on which direction Jonathon Brooks is going to fall on that. But I do wonder, like, he's not going to turn 21 until July. Yeah. Shouldn't we give him a little bit of a break on the ACL from the fact that like he could skip this year and still be younger than some of the running backs we're comparing him to?
I think you and I should, yes. I think that anyone listening to this should absolutely. Do I think the dynasty market is going to do that? I don't know. I think that the dynasty market is not only really reactionary, but it's really, it looks at production and says, oh, this guy was good. I mean, look at perfect example of this. Look at Romeo Doubs and what happened with Doubs after the playoff run that the Packers had and like these big games that he was having and stuff like that. He was like wide receiver 35 at one point, within the dynasty market because he was producing, he was getting touchdowns, yada, yada, yada. But then you look at that wide receiver room and you're like, there's 4 legitimate players that are wideouts in that group. Why is Romeo Doubs being singled out in this way when Dontavian Wicks, coming off a really, really good rookie season, is 20 spots below him in wide receiver rank? It just doesn't make that much sense. The dynasty market just reacts so strongly to production. And if the production's not there for Brooks, you and I, if we draft Brooks, we'll say, all right, we're holding on to him, right? Like we're not trading him away after a down year coming off an ACL. But at the same time, we do want to always accumulate as much value as possible on our dynasty rosters. And there's at least a risk that is evident and already there and already sits there with Jonathon Brooks and his ACL that I think that you should at least use that and utilize that information to some degree.
Absolutely. And like with Benson, we'll finish with the upside. We'll finish with the positives. I do think like you got to take the ACL into account, but let's just get crazy. He goes day 2 to the Cowboys and he gets to October 1st and he's 100% Jonathon Brooks. I think he has the most upside in this class, and like he could easily be a top, maybe not easily, but if everything goes right, he could be a top 10 dynasty running back like 8 months from now, right?
Yeah, the other thing too is if he goes to a great landing spot, I think that people are going to be a little bit more lenient about a lack of production, right? Like if it's not there, or even if it is there, during the second, like, look, if Jonathon Brooks goes to Dallas and he dominates the second half of, like, I think it's possible that he would then dominate the second half of his rookie season, which is the piece of the season that matters most. We'll get the most influence in rankings, the way that we view these guys. I mean, he's probably like RB7, RB8 in Dynasty, you would assume,
Right.
After that point. So, yeah, I mean, I think that Brooks definitely still has that in his range of outcomes.